Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. And today we are talking about the D&D movie, Honor Among Thieves. And as you can tell, I'm a virgin. D&D kind of is something that I do regularly, and it's pretty cool. But back to the movie. The movie is pretty dang good. It's all around like a really solid movie, and I think that it captures the most feeling of being playing like in a session with your friends, because I think just the dialogue itself is pretty not too cringe. It's not too cringe, but D&D is cringe, so it's a little cringe. But overall, um the dialogue between the characters, you kind of feel like they 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 kind of grow as a group together with their like companionship and the way that they like interact as well, and kind of like banter as well when they as a group interact with other side characters, like the paladin, what's it, the paladin Zek. That's not Zinc, it's definitely Zek. um but yeah, Chris Pine is pretty cool. I liked him as like the bard, like rogue thiefish. His little storyline's cool and stuff like that. Um, Overall, I would say like as a D&D movie, it's way leagues better than any other D&D movies we've had in the past, because it utilizes the elements from like the setting of like the Forgotten Realms and 5e itself, and then kind of like adds on that and then makes it into a movie where you have all these characters, and they all kind of have like little quirks, which is kind of like the basis of like an actual D&D session. I think that's where they get the best, because if you're going in there expecting like I'm coming to watch a Tarantino movie, you don't kind of like get it. Like, it's not the point, because in D&D, like when you're creating a session, everything, as a storyteller, you're like the narrative that you weave is so like chaotic and loose that you can kind of only really rely on cliches, and you can kind of only really rely on things that are like definite and finite that are going to happen that you create. So as the storyteller, as like a DM or the game master, if you want to get real technical, um you only have control over so much, with players messing up with everything that you even created in the first place. So if you are going to make a bad guy, the simplest way to make the bad guy is just to make them evil with like kind of just evil motivations. We're not looking for a really in-depth villain, and that's what you get in the D&D movie. It's just red wizards who like are basically cultists that pray to like this evil god, and that's all you really need. Like, you don't need for your protagonist, especially in a D&D movie, you don't need your protagonist to have maybe some sort of special relation to the like the big bad evil guy. They just need to be kind of evil. Or you don't need your evil guy to have like a whole backstory. They can just be evil, and I think that's what sells a D&D movie the best, and that's like the best way I can kind of like describe it to other people, or like suggest it. It's, have you played D&D? If the answer is yes, then you're probably going to like this movie, because it kind of feels like a D&D session with like epic highs and epic lows, like high school football. But it feels like when the characters finally win, they earn their victory. And it also feels like, when the characters kind of like have like not like evil intention, but like their philosophies like contradict, and their weaknesses as people kind of come out. And I think that's another reason why the movie works so well, is because the characters themselves feel very kind of like realistic, and they all have like flaws to themselves, and or themselves they are weak. Like this party isn't like strong, they're like barely fifth level. The strongest person in there is a sorcerer, and he's like a crappy sorcerer throughout the whole movie, until he kind of like gets over his character flaw of being not having a lot of self-confidence. So the characters kind of all go through journeys, each and every single one of them, except for like one, the barbarian. But it's different in that sense, because she moves on, but it's still played for like laughs and stuff like that. You would understand what I mean if you would watch the movie. But there is one thing I will have to warn you guys, if you do go watch the D&D movie, there's a side character who they manage to hide in all like the trailers and everything, in the beginning of the movie you can kind of see them in the background in the first 10 minutes, but there's this character named Jet. Jet with looking at the wiki, Jet with two T's. Yeah, they really did go for some. They really did use a fantasy name generator. But yeah, there's this character named Jet, and throughout the whole like the movie like runtime, they kind of show up. They're not in the main party, but they show up enough to where you would think that they're like a main protagonist or anything. The directors, it's like this weird character who acts like they're the main character, but they're not. And if you play D&D, sometimes when you're in a party, there's just that person in your party who is so like annoyingly trying to like be the center of attention and everything. And when that like side character Jet like interacts with the main party, it's a little cringe. It's a little cringe, but it's pretty funny because directors did, and the people who created this character really made it so that they're usually the butt of the joke at the end of the day. They're not like somebody who is directly antagonizing the party, but somebody who, when interacting with the party, gets made to look like a bit of a goof. And I think that's pretty funny. And at the end of the movie, they do get their comeuppance, and they get a little moment. And I think when compared to a regular D&D session, you are going to have like joke characters or characters that are completely based around this silly idea that you have. Like I think one of a prime example is kind of like when you have like clever wordplay for a character, and Jet, the character himself, it isn't fast like you would consider, how we would consider like a Jet in real life, and and stuff like that. So his slowness is really played for laughs sometimes, and that can be a little bit forced. But I think that the jokes themselves don't always interrupt the story itself. See, when I'm playing D&D and I'm like with all my friends and everything, we're all kind of just trying to make each other laugh. Essentially, that's what it really kind of boils down to. Whoever like gets like the biggest laugh, it kind of has like the most memorable moment. And the character of Jet is kind of like the personification of that feeling, or of that like general like ideal that people who usually do play D&D in more of a silly, less serious fashion, like that's what they try and go for. So if I were to rate the D&D movie, I would give it like an 8.5, maybe a 9 out of 10, because if you go in there with the right mindset, then you receive the thing that you were expecting. Don't go in there expecting some grand story. Go in there as an action adventure comedy, and you're kind of just experiencing and being introduced into the world of like the Forgotten Realms and 5e through these characters, this like small story and the grander scheme of the world, because that's what you're really there for. You're really there for this smaller story that kind of could be built up into a larger one, where it seems to be just like the first step in a longer like staircase of storytelling and of narrative. And I think that's pretty special, considering like the day and the life of cinema that we experience now. Well, it's Chris Pines.